I'm so excited to have this conversation. It's such an intriguing topic, and we were talking about it at one of the lunch sessions yesterday. I was looking up some of the news coverage about Canadian AI, broadly speaking. How Canada became a hotspot for artificial intelligence research was one headline. Why Canada can win the AI race was another. And a third, 4 ways Canada can own the artificial intelligence century. So the world wants Canada to win, apparently. But is AI, like space in the 1950s or even 5G today, really something you can win? Navdeep?
Well, first of all, thank you for those kind words about Canada. It's really important to understand it's not about winning or losing. It's about playing a leadership role. And this is where, from my perspective, I want to make a nonpartisan comment. The success that we're seeing in artificial intelligence in Canada is a reflection of not only the investments our government's made, but previous governments also made as well. And as alluded earlier on in the remarks by the MCs, we've invested hundreds of millions of dollars, close to $500 million actually, in research in AI. And this is where we want to actually, quote unquote, win. It's really focusing on the research, the cutting edge research in artificial intelligence. And we have pioneers and household names like Yoshua Bengio from Montreal, or Jeffrey Hinton from U of T, or Rick Sun. So these individuals are not only well known in Canada, but they have international name recognition for the cutting edge research that they've done. And so from our perspective as a government, we realize this is the area where we can continue to succeed. We're a country of 37 million people. So it's not like we're going to produce tens of thousands of people in AI on an annual basis compared to some other parts of the world that have that kind of capability. But it's really on research excellence. And in the last budget, our government made historic investments in science, $4 billion. So a good chunk of that will go to different disciplines, including AI as well. So we're going to continue to play a leadership role in AI research. So when you talk about those headlines, when you talk about Canada, this is why I believe companies are investing here. This is why you see Canadian companies commercializing. We have an incredible ecosystem of AI startups in Canada. This is why large multinationals are coming to Canada because they see the talent. We're betting on people.
Yeah.
We're betting on our #1 resource, which is our talent. And I'll be more than glad to talk about a little bit about our diversity and our value proposition there. But this is where I see Canada in terms of the global context and why we've done well in the past and why we'll continue to do well in AI going forward.
So we've got 2 of them right here next to you, 2 of your talented Canadians. Steve, you are from here. You have a company here. Does this ring true to you? Are you concerned about attracting talent from all places, competing with other countries, if that even enters your purview?
I think I'm probably an interesting one to talk about this because I was, one of the big topics maybe 5 or 10 years ago is a lot around brain drain. Here we've always produced a lot of talent, and one of the common themes that was often talked about here is we're producing a lot of this great talent, and then that talent is kind of seeping out into other countries. And I was one of that, like I was part of the problem, I guess, at that point. I'd gone down to Silicon Valley, had spent 6 years working with Facebook and Instagram, and decided to move back 2 years ago. And the reason I decided to move back was not for personal reasons, although it's great to be home.
Political reasons, right?
Political reasons, that's right.
He's a big fan of the Trudeau government.
Oh, right.
Loved what you were up to, and I figured I had to come back and support the cause. But that is a part of it. I decided to start a business in artificial intelligence, saw a big opportunity, and I originally thought I was going to start it in Silicon Valley. I was already there. We were established. That seemed like the default place to build the business. And as I started to do some research, I realized that Toronto, Canada, was the best place in the world that I could build this business. And the reason is, for me, was fourfold. One is the research capability. We talked about it a little bit here, but I don't know if everybody understands how pervasive the work that had been done, even here in Toronto, has been outside of this country. So if you look at the big research labs at Facebook, Google, now Uber, Twitter, I believe, Microsoft, like a lot of the big labs are run by folks that did their graduate work or their postgraduate work here at the University of Toronto under Professor Jeffrey Hinton. And there's this nice little Canadian mafia that is out there in the AI world right now. And a lot of talent is staying here now. And so we've got a great research institute here in Toronto. We've got great hubs in Edmonton and Montreal. And I think that the research talent, the overall talent pool here, we talk a lot about the number of STEM grads we have, but we also just have a lot of really great people that can help you build a business here. We talked about diversity quickly.
Yeah.
I think anybody who's kind of walked down the street here will sense that diversity is reality in Canada. It is not something that we are striving for. It is something that is natural in this environment. We're one of the most diverse countries in the world. Toronto is one of the most diverse cities in the world. And so that brings a lot of perspective to these issues. So not only can we get great top-end technical talent and research talent, but we naturally have a pool of more diverse candidates to be able to bring interesting perspectives to a lot of the big issues that we're dealing with. So as a startup who's been able to grow really quickly, have access to capital, a lot of the issues that you would normally have as a startup, it's been a great experience moving back. And I think a lot of the hype that people are reading about is real. And that's why you're seeing a lot of the investment, both foreign and domestic, in this area.
Raquel, you're not a native Canadian, but you came here for a reason. Why?
So the reason I came here was because Canada was, is, and will be at the forefront of AI. And there is many reasons why this is the case. First, the talent pool is excellent, and in particular in Toronto Waterloo corridor is fantastic. I came here to join University of Toronto as a professor, where it's one of the top places for doing AI research. Also, immigration policy is very good here, and as a foreigner, I really appreciate the diversity that we see out there. I subscribe to Canadian values, and I moved from the States, and that was great to see. And since then, right, it's about building the, I really consider Canada home, and it's about building the ecosystem that will allow us to really retain the talent. This is one of the reasons I co-founded the Vector Institute with Jeff Hinton, another fantastic faculty in AI. And the idea was that, we were seeing that we form amazing talent, but everybody was going either south of the border or to other countries. And that was really a pity, right? We were sort of missing the boat into why are we doing this? And since then, it's been a year and a half or so, and we see that a lot of talent is actually staying in Canada. We have repatriated a lot of the talent, and there is so much talent coming from outside that doesn't have necessary ties to Canada, want to be here because this is the place to be. So we are, really building an ecosystem that will allow Canada to maintain that forefront.
We talked about talent earlier. So even though it's not a race to win this AI thing, countries are clearly competing, right?
Correct.
So we've got, Canada's got its pan-Canadian AI strategy, right?
Right.
The United States has a task force, as we're wont to do. And I know that the Pentagon in particular is spending several $billion on AI for just weaponization. And then China, of course, has its Made in China 2025 plan, which basically wants to be the world's AI leader by 2030. So you are, even though a rising tide lifts all boats, you're competing for the same talent, you're competing for resources, companies, and so forth. How are you thinking, and this is directed all three of you, how are you thinking about that? How do you make sure that entrepreneurs and companies don't just go across the border to the States?
So I'll start from my perspective. What's Canada's value proposition? What does Canada have that differentiates Canada? What's our competitive advantage?
I'm told you're very nice.
Well,
that's what Justin said.
True. That is very true. We're very nice, but also it's our diversity is highlighted. And not only do we leverage our local diversity, which you need diversity of thoughts and perspectives to really, again, be innovative, to think outside the box, to challenge the status quo, to solve problems. So diversity in general is very important. But our value proposition above and beyond that also is that we have access to global talent. So when you talked about the other jurisdictions, our immigration policies in particular really differentiate ourselves. So we introduced a global skills strategy. And the premise of this is saying if you're a company and you need someone, and if you can't find that individual in Canada, which is possible, we recognize that. We don't have a monopoly on good ideas. So if you can't find that individual in Canada, you can access that talent from anywhere around the world, and you can bring that individual to Canada in a matter of 2 weeks. So the visa processing time is only 2 weeks. So just think about that. If you're a company, you're moving very quickly. You got to be agile. You need access to talent. You need to scale up your business, or you need somebody with certain technical skills. You can bring that individual to Canada in a matter of 2 weeks. So that's a big, big deal. And this is why I think we're really well positioned. We have a diverse domestic workforce, and we have access to global talent. And if you think about companies, and if you look at their costs, the vast majority of the costs now are not on the assets, the buildings, et cetera, but it's actually the talent and the people that they're investing in. And so this is an area where we strategically focus, not only on the research side of it, but also access to global talent as well.
And do you find that protectionist policies that are kind of taking, gaining traction across the world, kind of accelerating that dynamic?
Well, again, it just highlights what makes Canada so unique and special. When you're seeing the rise of anti-immigrant sentiments, populist politics, nationalism, and our brand in Canada is that we're open to trade, we're open to investment, and we're open to people. That brand, that openness is so critical. And clearly when other countries are headed in a particular direction, it just further highlights how important Canada is for the long-term stability of a company, because you want a stable government, you want a company that's got sound economics, and our macroeconomic conditions are strong, our growth rate is strong, our unemployment rate is low, our debt to GDP ratio is the best in the G7 countries. So we've got some of the basic, financial situation in good position. We have a strong, stable political system, and we have, by default, an open society. We don't take it for granted. We work hard at it. I'm not saying we're perfect, but I think that, coupled with where the direction the other parts of the other countries in the world are going, it really distinguishes Canada. And this is why I highlighted the global skills strategy, because I think if you're a company and you want to invest in Canada, you know that you've got a stable system, a country that has access to Europe now with free trade there, in North America and in Asia as well, but also you have access to the best global talent in AI, and obviously other streams as well.
And your food's pretty good too, as we learned last night. Steve, you know Silicon Valley. You worked there, Facebook and Instagram, right? So how are you thinking about the talent, the hunt for talent, as you've skipped across the international border?
Yeah, I think the challenges are all the same. I think people generally want to work. They want to do high impact work. They want to feel a sense of purpose in where they're working. I think never more so than a generation we're seeing come up now. It's not just about matching compensation in a very traditional sense. I think we're starting to see more people ask the question of, what are you about? Like, why am I coming here? What is the mission of this business? What are the values of this business? Do I hear from people that you're living your values, or are they just things that you write on the wall? And I think where we've had some success is we've focused on that from day one. We've been very clear about what we are and what we aren't. And we don't need to be everything to everybody. We want to qualify people in or out of the company if the things that we focus on and the things that we care about, if our mission and values align with you, we'd love to have you in the business. And we'd love to have as many diverse perspectives, but very much on an aligned set of values. And I think that's one of the areas where it's been very helpful, I think, to be in Canada. It's a very livable country. Most people that live here would like to stay here. I think folks that have left in the past have not left because they don't love living in Canada. They've left because they felt it's more prosperous to leave, and I don't think that's the case anymore. And it's never been easier to bring international, like top international talent into the country. It's easy now to be able to get them in from a visa process standpoint, but also with everything that's happening geopolitically, we've noticed a big difference. There's a lot of top-notch talent that normally would be on their way to Silicon Valley right now that have changed their plans. And this is a really great alternative for them. It gets them over into North America. It gets them into a big hub. They are close to all of the other kind of hubs that they would care about in this continent, but they can live in a city that they feel comfortable, and that gives them the same level of opportunity. So I think it's been good so far, but we need to continue to scale up. We're hiring hundreds of people over the next couple of years. That becomes more challenging, I think, as you compete with more national players.
Sure. Raquel, you look at this through the lens of autonomous driving, which is such an exciting field. How are you thinking about the talent search? Your own company has been quite aggressive, particularly in the States, with securing talent for this.
Yeah, so it's definitely a very competitive market, the one that I live in. So it's important to think about, the Canadian market as being an open market, because our competition is not just the Canadian competition, right? We really have to compete with the Silicon Valley, particularly if you do, self-driving cars. This is where most of the people are. So yeah, it's important to provide the workforce with, as you mentioned before, opportunities that are of global impact. Right? They have to do something that is super, super exciting that's going to influence the world. At the same time, they have to have compensation that, is aligned with where, other opportunities that they're going to have. And we need immigration policies such that we can retain and also attract talent. And it's important that we think about, how we're going to grow our Canadian companies, our startups, how we're going to form the ecosystem such that they can actually flourish. And at the same time, it's very important to have investments and companies open shop in Canada, providing, amazing opportunities like Uber, for example, but working with the local ecosystem such that we are not just taking talent, we're actually helping to attract more talent to come to the country or stay in the country.
Yeah. Now, we've been painting a lovely picture of how great Canada is, right?
So far, so good.
So far, so good. All right, you heard it from the guy. I was reading a recent survey. It was of 305 companies, and it said that Canadian companies lag those of other countries in deployment of AI. So while we've got this great critical mass of research, cutting-edge stuff, when it comes to actually working it into the rest of the economy, behind other countries. And the reasons I found very interesting was the ethics first view of Canada. That was a limiting factor. Canadian caution, which you'll have to explain that to me, guys, and humility. And I had Jean-François Gagné, JF, on my session yesterday, and he was saying, well, the U.S. loves to be, I'm paraphrasing, but the U.S. loves to be a bit reckless when it comes to these things, and that's got its own, pros and cons, but so it goes. How do we feel about actually getting AI into the rest of the companies who are present here at the forum?
So before I get to that, just on the last point on immigration, aside from the fact that we have this incredibly fast visa processing time, we have stickiness through family reunification. So if you come here and you fall in love with Canada, then you want to get married, or if you want to invite your parents or your siblings, we have, again, a very smooth process for family reunification as well. So that's very important, because not only about the individual, but about that individual's family as well. With regards to tech adoption, I think this is just a broader challenge Canada has. It's not only in AI. It's generally speaking, particularly with the SMEs, the small and medium-sized businesses, tech adoption has been a challenge for us. And AI, we may talk about it, but particularly many smaller companies are intimidated by it. So what we did to deal with this issue is introduced a concept called superclusters. And the objective of this is to bring large businesses and small businesses and academic institutions to come together and create an ecosystem, to create an environment where they can co-collaborate, where they can share best practices, where they can solve problems together. And to give you an idea, there's 450 businesses that are part of our superclusters. And there's one specifically actually in artificial intelligence and scale AI. And the idea is, out of the 450 businesses, 300 plus are small businesses. So we want small businesses to have access to those larger companies, to be able to better understand not only how AI is important, but how to really adopt that AI practice into their inventory management systems, how to better customize for their clients, how to deal with better efficiencies and processes in their businesses. So we've actually created these ecosystems across the country through these supercluster initiatives to really deal with that tech adoption issue. And what's really great is if you're a large multinational or if you're a global company and you want to invest in Canada and you're trying to figure out where you need to connect, you can come and connect with these superclusters. Because this is just the starting point. These superclusters are growing and their membership is open. And the best part is it's not about government. It's industry-led. Government just uses a convening power to bring people together, to bring these small businesses and large businesses together with academic institutions. So if you're a company, you want to invest in Canada, you can be part of this supercluster, particularly in AI. And this is one way we've created a new model to help with the adoption of AI, particularly for our small businesses.
Yeah. Before we continue, I'm going to come to the audience in a moment with questions, so please prepare yours. Steve?
Yeah, I love that you brought up this question, because essentially this is what my company is focused on right now. It's about how do we help more traditional businesses compete with the likes of Amazon and others by democratizing some of the capabilities and helping them on this kind of transformation that they're on. And it's challenging. I think one of the big issues that I've seen consistently and very thematically from executive teams and boards of larger companies and mid-sized companies is that they tend not to have recalibrated their risk models yet. So AI tends to be a challenging area in a sense that, as Raquel will tell you, it is simple to understand once you get a good mental model for it, but it can be very complicated in terms of the way that a lot of people discuss it. And so it's difficult for a lot of executives to calibrate on what is the opportunity today. Very pragmatically, what should I be doing today? And it's not likely the things that you're seeing most on the news. It is not the flying robot that sets up your bank account or whatever the most outrageous version of AI would be. In a lot of cases, it's dealing with some of the core parts of your business that could just be much more effectively delivered if you thought about them AI first. And I think so the challenge is if you don't really have a mental model for what underlying trends are driving this, so if you don't understand that this is really a software movement, Mark Andreessen said it well, I thought, when he said, software is eating the world. I think we can all agree, like, software is eating the world now, and AI is eating software. It is just making software a lot smarter than it was before. And by having smarter software that is moving from kind of a deterministic paradigm where everything is driven off rules and certainty to a probabilistic paradigm where we are making predictions in a bunch of scenarios, and those predictions have percentages associated with them, probabilities as opposed to certainty. We need to be able to deal with those probabilistic outcomes and then use those to drive our business. And I think that has been a particular challenge for large companies because they think of what they're doing today as the lowest risk alternative, when likely the practices of today are the highest risk thing they could be doing as they think about the movement inside of these industries. But if you can't recalibrate on a common framework, it becomes really difficult to make the business case to move more aggressively to some of the AI alternatives. I think the other thing, too, just to mention it, is the capabilities are still evolving. So there are not a lot of companies like ours yet out there that can make this approachable to big businesses or small businesses. Right. And so in a lot of cases, we are just turning the research capability into actual consumable business models that then can find their way into industry. And that's the most exciting piece. And that's the piece I think we need to be fanning the flames on right now, is the commercialization piece. Because we're doing really well on the research side. But the commercialization side, we are early innings, and there's a lot at stake in getting that right.
Raquel, you know the research side. Would you agree with that statement?
I think so, yeah. So I think there is, a lot that Canada has done in research, and as one of the mandates of the Vector Institute is to try to educate our local companies into how they can use AI for bringing their business to the next level. But one of the things that we find is that there is a language barrier into how we talk about this and how we can communicate into what AI can do for you, and that's something that it's been perhaps a bit of a struggle that we need to educate the educators into how we can actually funnel all this information such that people can understand that AI is not this complicated thing over there. It's actually something very simple that you can use as a tool to just power your business. And the other thing that, we talk about businesses a lot here, but a sector where Canada can do a lot of very interesting things is health. We have a public sector, right, which means that actually data can be shared. And AI we can do a lot of cutting-edge research that can advance our medicine to the next level by exploring that opportunity. And I think this is one of the things that the Vector Institute is focusing on, but definitely we should do much more in this direction.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, let's go to the audience for questions. Let's see here. Forgive me, it is very bright up here. Not a single question about artificial intelligence. All right. Come on.
Let's get the butt.
That's not possible.
Sure. Good morning. My name is Doug Stevens. I'm with Retail Profit. I have a question that's more focused generally on innovation, not just AI. Recently, there was a study done that found that out of 50 economies, despite all the good things that are going for Canada, we rank 22nd on the list of 50 economies in terms of general innovativeness. That was 11 positions below the US, and the US, in fact, had slipped out of the top 10. What are your views on why that's the case? And moreover, how can Canada turn that around?
So I'm getting looks in my direction, so I'll try to address that. First of all, I look at these rankings with a bit of caution depending on what the inputs are. You know, how they determine what innovation looks like. Is it the number of patents? Is it the amount of money for science? Is it R&D? Like, there's different dimensions to it as well. So a little asterisk there depending on what the inputs are and what data they have. Sometimes I've gone back saying, what's up with our ranking? And they're using like data from 3 or 4 years ago. So just wanted to flag that. I'm not saying that with this particular data point that you raised. Overall, I think what's really important to note from our perspective is the challenge that we have is when people think of innovation, they think of the latest phone, the latest, you know, Samsung or iPhone or whatever the new technology may be. But innovation is fundamentally about finding solutions to problems, about improving processes. And in Canada, we have a large service economy. And because of that, the service improvements that are taking place, the process efficiencies is not necessarily reflected in that data as well. So I would say overall our position is really strong. It just our ability to communicate that data in the new service model economy that we have is the bit of the challenge as well. And overall, in terms of productivity versus the US, we've had this historical challenge. ICT investment per worker is far less than the US. And we're making actually major strides on the skills aspect of it as well, in terms of upgrading skills, investing in technological skills, but also bringing forward programming and tax programming like SHRED, IRAP. These are Canadian programs essentially to incentivize companies to make more investments in improving their processes, which is fundamentally what innovation is about. So we recognize that the data is not properly captured. We also recognize we can and must do better, and we actually have programming in place to do that. And we're in a global race. So Canada's not only doing this in isolation, other jurisdictions have stepped up as well. And so our relative position, even though we've made leaps and bounds in terms of improvements, other jurisdictions also have stepped up, and we recognize that as well.
Fair enough. We had one over here. Yes, sir. Your name and who you're with, please.
So, Louis Roy from Optel Group. My question is for our AI specialist. We see China has a really open data policies, and with the WeChat and the Alibaba, they do incredible stuff, and you know, AI eat data. I worry in Europe with their data privacy. Will it slow down Europe? So what position do you think Canada should take on the data privacy that will run AI?
Do you want to start, or you want me? You want me to go? Yeah. This is a tricky issue. I think Canada has had a history of taking issues like privacy and ethics quite seriously. I don't think I would advise us to move completely to an open structure where we don't take into consideration some of the important kind of ethical and privacy issues that I think are intertwined into a lot of these advances. But that being said, I do think that there's room to improve how we think about use of data and what we are protecting. I do think that we are in a privileged position in some ways. We talked about healthcare. I think there are other areas of Canada where we've got a backbone that we can build off of. We've had a history of leading in some of these areas around privacy. We need to make sure that the regulations are not stopping us from flowing through some of this innovation, that we are creating space for entrepreneurs to be able to test new ideas so that it's not restrictive, because I think that's where you will see it is easy to go to China today and do a lot of things, like experiment in ways with a big population that can be more challenging here. The question is it more challenging for the right reason or the wrong reason? I think over the long term, we've got to find the right balance between how do we do this in a way that stimulates innovation and allows the free flow of the right type of data and the right type of connectiveness with the rights of individuals and treating them fairly, thinking about issues like ethics and bias, privacy, security, a lot of the hot topics that I really do think will affect more people. You know, we often talk about the fear of, you know, these killer robots enslaving us and running our economies in the future. I think the bigger fear for people in this room should be the silent killer here is that we will treat people very unethically and with a high degree of bias if we don't understand how these systems work and make sure that they are structured in a way that actually allows progression as opposed to takes unintentionally, probably with actually great intentions, takes us a couple of steps back because the data that we're using or the way that we've constructed the systems are inherently flawed.
So if I can add a little bit to that, so it's important that we have an open enough policy such that we can drive innovation, while at the same time taking ethics and privacy into consideration. And as scientists, it's our duty to develop algorithms that guarantee privacy, that guarantee that there is no biases in the decision making. And there is, you know, a broad community that is actually looking into this, and you know, some of it in Canada.
Yeah.
And just very briefly,
Of course.
We're actually, as a government, undergoing a consultation around data and digital transformation, fundamentally trying to deal with that issue of trust. Because we need to establish that trust in order to really unleash the potential of AI. And we're closely monitoring GDPR, both the pros and cons, because we're trying to see, are there some unintended consequences of that on algorithms and on AI? And as you know, data is so critical for AI. Big data is absolutely essential, but we need to establish that trust. So we're looking at updating our principles-based framework called PIPEDA in Canada. We're trying to make sure it's compatible with Europe, that's interoperable, that we avoid a patchwork for companies. So we're not trying to create a separate made in Canada solution, but we're trying to make sure we closely learn the lessons from the European experience, adopt a model here that really establishes trust. Once we have that, then I'm confident that we can really reap the benefits from the potential of AI because data is such a key component of it.
AI, a lot of challenges, a lot of opportunity. Navdeep, Steve, Raquel, thank you for joining us at Fortune Global Forum.
Thank you.